Did you know that butter has been around for over 9,000 years, and that ancient civilizations believed it could cure illnesses? Yeah, there's a lot more to that spread on your bread than meets the eye. In this video, we'll show you exactly how butter is made and what it's made of. Stick around because you won't believe where your favorite dairy treat comes from. From cow to cream. Now, butter doesn't just magically show up in your fridge. It starts way earlier, right on a dairy farm. And you know who really does all the hard work in the beginning? Cows. That's right, cows are the butter MVPs. Without them, there'd be no milk, and without milk, there's definitely no butter. So give it up for the cows. Every single day, dairy cows are milked, usually 2 or 3 times. Farmers use these big machines called milking machines. They hook up gently to the cows and suck out the milk in a clean and careful way. The cows don't seem to mind because the machines feel kinda like a calf nursing. Once the milk comes out, it goes into huge stainless steel tanks that keep everything nice and cold. These tanks are super important because milk can go bad really fast if it gets warm. Now, in case you didn't know, cows don't just produce milk nonstop. They need to be fed a balanced diet and taken care of properly to stay healthy and give good quality milk. Farmers work hard to make sure their cows are well fed with hay, grains, and sometimes silage, which is basically fermented grass. Sounds gross, but cows love it. Once the tanks are full or enough milk has been collected, a big insulated truck shows up at the farm. This happens every 2 days, sometimes even daily depending on how much milk the cows produce. The trucks have these special compartments that keep the milk cold during its ride to the factory. It's like a fridge on wheels, but before the milk gets used, it has to pass a few tests. At the factory gate, the milk gets sampled. They test it for temperature, bacteria levels, and make sure there's nothing weird in it like antibiotics or dirty stuff. If the milk doesn't pass, it gets rejected on the spot. Nobody wants funky butter, right? Now, here comes the fun part. Once the milk gets the green light, it's pumped into massive storage tanks at the factory. These tanks can hold thousands of liters. Imagine swimming pools filled with milk. Wild, right? So to sum it up, butter begins with healthy cows on clean farms. The milk gets collected with care, stored cold, and transported in super clean trucks to the butter factory. And the real transformation begins right there. But before anything starts turning into butter, we gotta get that creamy part out of the milk. So let's move on and see how factories do that next. Separating and pasteurizing the cream. Now that the milk has arrived at the butter factory, it's time to split it up. Why? Because only one part of the milk actually turns into butter. The rest gets used for other stuff like skimmed milk or cheese. The butter part? That's all in the cream. So how do they get the cream out? Factories use a powerful machine called a centrifuge. And no, it's not science fiction. It's a real machine that spins the milk around super fast, like thousands of times a minute. When this happens, the heavier part of the milk, which is the skimmed milk, moves to the outside. The lighter part, which is the cream, stays closer to the center. And boom! Just like that, they're separated. Think of it like this. Imagine you shake a bottle of salad dressing. If you let it sit, the oil rises to the top and the vinegar sinks. That's kind of what happens in a centrifuge, except way faster and much cooler. This step is super important because butter can't be made without cream. Now here's where things get serious. Once the cream is separated, it's not used right away. First, it goes through pasteurization. And no, that's not a scary word. Pasteurization is just a fancy way of saying, let's heat this up to kill off anything nasty. The cream is heated to about 85 degrees Celsius for about 15 seconds. That's hot enough to wipe out any bacteria that could spoil the butter or make someone sick. You may think heating cream would mess with the flavor, but actually it helps. Pasteurization doesn't just make cream safer, it also gives it a better shelf life. So butter made from pasteurized cream lasts longer in your fridge. That means fewer trips to the store and less butter going bad. After pasteurization, the cream is cooled down quickly. Factories don't just leave it sitting around. It goes through a cooling system that brings it to the perfect temperature for the next step. Yep, there's more. Because now that we've got perfect, pasteurized cream, we're finally ready for the main event. Yep, it's time to turn that cream into butter. Get ready because this next step is where things get really interesting. Maturing and churning the cream. Now that the cream has been pasteurized and cooled, it's left to rest and mature. Now here's where things start to get tasty. During this resting time, the cream isn't just sitting there doing nothing. It actually develops flavor. Think of it like a good soup or a juicy steak. The longer it sits, the better it tastes. And in case you didn't know, a lot of fancy butters owe their rich, tangy flavor to this exact part of the process. But wait, there's more. You have to brace yourself for what I'm about to tell you, but sometimes the factory adds special bacteria to the cream. Yes, bacteria. But don't freak out just yet, because these are the good kinds of bacteria, just like the ones in yogurt or cheese. They're called cultures, and they help give the butter a richer taste. It also makes the butter easier to digest for some people. This step makes cultured butter, and it's a big deal in Europe where people treat butter like gold. After the cream has matured and developed all that flavor, it's time for the real action. Churning. This is where things get wild. The cream goes into a big machine that spins and shakes it like crazy. Imagine a giant blender, but instead of making a smoothie, it's turning cream into butter. What's happening inside is actually kinda cool. The fat molecules in the cream are bumping into each other over and over until they finally clump together. These clumps turn into tiny butter grains. At the same time, a thin liquid separates and starts pooling at the bottom. That liquid is called buttermilk. And no, it's not the thick stuff you buy at the store. This is real old-school buttermilk, and it's mostly water with a bit of milk left in it. By the end of churning, what you get is a bowl of yellow, soft butter grains floating in milky water. It doesn't look much like the smooth butter you're used to yet. But just hang on. We're getting there. The churning is basically the moment the cream stops being cream and officially becomes butter. It's kind of like the big turning point in a movie where the main character becomes the hero, except our hero is spreadable and tastes amazing on toast. Now that the butter grains have formed, it's time to get them cleaned up and ready for their final makeover. And that brings us to the next part. Washing, salting, and shaping. So now we've got our butter grains swimming around in buttermilk. But here's the thing. If we left that buttermilk in the mix, the butter would spoil super fast and have a weird, sour flavor, and nobody wants that. So what do? We wash the butter, of course. This part is kind of like giving the butter a nice cold bath. The butter grains get rinsed in clean cold water, sometimes a few times, to make sure all the leftover buttermilk is gone. The workers or machines gently stir the grains during this bath so everything gets washed evenly. You might not think butter needs a spa day, but trust me, it makes a big difference in taste and shelf life. Once the washing is done, the butter grains get squished together. This is called working the butter. Factories use big kneading machines to mash the grains into one smooth mass. In fact, it looks like a giant robot hand is massaging the butter. And honestly, it's kind of fun to watch. But why do they do this? Well, it makes the butter creamier, smoother. It also helps squeeze out any extra water hiding in the butter. And too much water could make it spoil quickly. You want your butter to be rich and soft, not wet and sad. So this step is really important to get that perfect texture. Now comes the flavor boost. Some butter gets salt added, not just for taste, but to help it last longer. Salt is a natural preservative. It stops tiny bacteria from growing and also gives the butter that familiar salty kick you love. Some butters stay unsalted though. These are usually used in baking or by people who want full control over the saltiness of their food. Factories use special machines to mix the salt in evenly. That way, every bit of butter tastes the same. You won't get one bite that's bland and another one that's way too salty. It's all balanced. And in case you're wondering, fancy butter might even use sea salt or Himalayan salt. That's butter living its best life. Once everything is mixed and the butter is finally smooth, creamy, and flavorful, it's time to shape it. Butter goes into molds or machines that press it into the shapes we know. You've probably seen the small rectangular blocks or the long sticks of butter in the store. Those shapes aren't just for looks. They make it easy to cut, wrap, and store. After shaping, the butter is moved into a super cold room so it stays firm and fresh. This cold blast also helps it keep its shape when it's getting packed. Then the butter gets wrapped in foil or wax paper or sealed in tubs depending on the brand. And just like that, your butter is done and ready for action. All it needs now is a trip to the store shelf and a place in your fridge. Speaking of the butter in your fridge, let me tell you a bit about some of the best butter brands in the world. You may think all butter tastes the same because they have similar manufacturing processes, but once you try these, you'll know the difference. Kerrygold from Ireland is super famous, and for a good reason. Their cows eat fresh green grass, and it gives the butter a rich golden color and a smooth, creamy taste. Then there's Plugra from the USA, which has extra butter fat, making it perfect for baking. French brands like President are also top-notch, especially if you love that rich cultured flavor. And for something fancy, Echery from France is hand-churned and sold in wooden baskets. Yeah, it's that serious. These brands take butter to a whole new level. So from the milking of cows to the churning and packaging, butter undergoes a fascinating journey before it reaches your table. Next time you spread butter on your toast, just think about the incredible process behind it before you take a bite. With that said, head to the comments below and tell us which butter brand is your favorite. And if you want to learn the secrets behind how everyday products are made, subscribe to our channel and we'll see you in the next one.